Best music.
You're listening to SBRLiveFM.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, thank you so much for joining us right here in the Praise Life Morning Show, SBRLiveFM.com, Fun City Radio FM, Success Radio. We're here with guest Mystery. I love the name Mystery. Yeah, I really love the name Mystery. I met Mystery 2 weeks ago. I think, is it 2 weeks ago already? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Mystery FURTADO is the mother of two energetic and vibrant African kings. I love that. By the name of Kade and Kalim. She is an international trained nurse currently preparing to sit the RN exam. Mystery is passionate about the diabetes management and prevention, which is why she formed a not-for-profit called Type Diabetes It, which is the first BPOC led by diabetics organization in Southern Ontario. This role led her to starting the first BPOC community garden in London, Ontario, which has now grown into a greenhouse project. Mystery was featured this year in London Business Magazine. 20 is their 20s, as she also started Granny Peas, a small business that produces sea moss products. Granny Peas is inspired by my grandmother. Mystery's passion for health and wellness drove her to creating a brand that she can share with the world. And I want to welcome Mystery to SBRLiveFM.com. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, there's a couple of things that when we first talked and you told me what you're doing, I became very interested. Why? Because my mother was also diabetic, so was my dad. And at the present moment, for myself, my A1C is fine, but I keep seeing these little spikes. And we had a little conversation about this. You know what? You need to talk to me on my show a little bit about this diabetes or diabetic or being diabetic. What is this all about? Can you give us a little bit of a headway about that?
So when we're talking about diabetes in our community, it is multifactorial, meaning that we have genetic predisposition, but we also have to assess our lifestyle, right? When we talk about our lifestyle, we're looking at what we eat. So I'll start off by saying a quote that my mom always told me. She said that, you know something, your genes may load the gun, but your lifestyle is what pulls the trigger.
I like
so
that.
I took that saying, thank you. I took that saying, and when I was creating Type Diabetes, when we talk, because for me, diabetes is something personal. I've lost both my maternal and paternal grandparents' diabetes. Since I was the age of 8, I was administering insulin to my grandmother. Not too sure how and why I was that brave at the age of 8 to be giving insulin. But I always reflect back on what we ate. And as I dove more into the diabetes education and learning more about it, as a community, we have to talk about what we eat. When we talk about what we eat, it has to do a lot with the fact that our foods have been influenced by westernization and slavery, especially when we're talking about those from the African diaspora. So let's look at something as simple as rice. How many times do we eat rice in a day sometimes?
I love rice.
Exactly. Right? We all love rice, and sometimes we have it 2 or 3 times in a day without even thinking twice, because that's how we were brought up. But not saying that rice is bad, but if we look at our ancestors, there was only very few places in Africa that actually cultivated rice. Okay? For the majority of us, we ate ground food, right? And I challenge everybody listening, especially those from the Caribbean, Central and South America, Black Americans, Canadians. We need to find out where your parents are from and how long has your country been actually producing rice? Because rice was brought to us during the westernization period and also during the slave trade movement. Another popular food we eat a lot of meat. We eat oxtail, we eat chicken, a lot of chicken. We eat cow foot, we eat, chicken foot. We eat all these types, and I see you laughing because you understand exactly. And while we've managed to make these foods tasty, and they're now some, they're amazing, in reality those are the foods fed to us by our slave masters. Those are the rejects from the animal parts. So you find that pigtail is highly preserved in salt, but that's because there's no refrigerators. You find out we eat a lot of different parts of the animals, and again, it's tasty, and I grew up eating them, but we were fed those as slaves. So when we look at how our foods have transitioned, and now we look at our energy, like, how active we are, as a people, you find that these contributing factors leads to an increase in diabetes in our community. Because for one, we're no longer out in the plantation, but we're still eating as if though we're burning the amount of food we're eating. So our most of our ancestors were either, they worked the land, they were more active, they walked, right? But now, how many of us walk to the grocery store? We might not even live close enough to walk to a grocery store.
Well, I do
Especially
live close
for
to a
rich.
grocery store, but I still drive. I still drive. Listen, I want to pause for a second because there's something that very interesting that I was looking for it, and I went to your website, and it's called diabetes.ca.
Yes,
Diabete-it.ca. And
correct.
you're from Belize,
That's correct.
which is in South America.
Central America.
Central America, sorry. Central America, sorry. Central America. And your passion alone is what is driving you to do this, to start this organization. Before you continue with what you're telling us, tell me a little bit about your organization.
So type diabetes, as I kind of touched on in the beginning, when I first migrated to Canada, my initial plan was to only do relief work for Belize. In Belize, diabetes is top 3 cause of death for the entire country. We have a population of about 300,000 and maybe a little bit more now. And ideally, I wanted to bring relief work, education, and support to Belize because diabetes is so rampant. So initially, type diabetes started out just doing relief work for Belize. But as I got in the process of getting my education accredited and doing all the transfer and jumping through all the hurdles to now be at the point to sit my exam, I realized that there was so much for me to do in my own backyard. There's a lack of cultural representation in the healthcare field, period. When we look at diabetes, we don't have enough people of color talking about it, talking about the factors that leads to why our community have a higher rates of self-report diabetes. So in Ontario, if you're a person of color, we are at 8.4% in our community in comparison to someone of Caucasian descent, which is only 4.2. So we're actually 6% higher when we're talking about self-report diabetes in Ontario. I also picked up the Charter for Diabetes that talks about the Charter Law for Diabetes, whereby it's a big document compiled in 2018 that was giving very few reports and statistics and actually calling on the government to invest in more culturally competent diabetes management, because 1 in 3 Canadians are affected by diabetes. They either have it-related complications. So I went back to my board and I said, hey, like we can actually impact change here. Like I never really saw myself particularly, like I felt that there was enough fighters in Canada, enough advocates. I didn't really see that I fit, but then I realized that I did, and that I can and create change and impact so many lives because I have a lot of knowledge, I'm passionate about it, and I can help. So what we do is we provide culturally competent diabetes self-care management and prevention. We run programs whereby we have the same conversation we're having right now, talking about our Afro-Heritage food pyramid, talking about portion control, talking about exercise. We started a community garden to increase access because, as I mentioned before, it's multifactorial. So if you look at us as a community, when we migrate, we have other issues such as job security, education, So all these things plays a role into or accessing to quality produce. And if you live in a food desert, you might not have access to, fresher produce. You might be getting it from a local grocery store that might not carry the best fruits and vegetables. So having all of these conversations, empowering the community to make those healthy life choices, providing them with ethnocultural food boxes, which are boxes contain no rice, no meat, because the idea is to empower families to have a meal that is mostly vegetables and increase fruits, because the pandemic has shown how much more, people, racialized community, low income communities are affected, um, you know, by food insecurity. So we really target cultural nutrition, looking at food insecurity, empowering the family unit to make those healthier choices collectively, being a source of consistent information. And, our long term goal is to have the first diabetes health center in southwestern Ontario. Because if we look at Toronto, there's several health centers that cater to people of color, minority groups that, provide culturally competent healthcare, mental health resources, and diabetes. But if you look at London and southwestern Ontario, there is no such model. So we're building our way up to have a space that is safe, that people from the community can come, access the resources, be a part of the training, and the idea is to lower the rates of diabetes in our community. But baby steps, because first is the knowledge, then is the empowerment piece.
Well, as you're talking, I'm seeing in my column, my comments here, for us as West Indian folks, Caribbean folks, when you talk about the oxtail and the rice and the chicken and all that kind of stuff, that's what we basically, that's what our foods. I visited Kenya, and I realized that rice was not one of the main diets that they have there. It was everything else. Everything else. I mean, they had the chicken and they had the beef, right? I didn't eat beef, of course. I am not a meat eater. I probably eat fish now and again, but mostly I am a vegetarian, so to speak. And I stopped that for a long time. But all the stuff that you talk about in terms of food, like my mom and my dad, that's how they ate. And of course, as I told you about, my parents were diabetic, and subsequently that was the cause of them having swollen hearts, and my dad having kidney failure, and all because of that. And now that I found out later on what the cause is, so most of all for us as Africans in the diaspora, from the Caribbean and so forth, you're saying that our diet is the main factor.
It's one of the factors that we have control over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as I mentioned, our lifestyle plays an integral role. The reason why I'm focusing on what we eat is because diabetes is a silent killer, which means that when you're young, your body is able to fight off initial signs. And because we have a non-trusting relationship with the healthcare system, and rightfully so, we seek help. We go to the hospital as our last resort. I'm pretty sure many of us, we always have that home medicine, bush medicine. You go to the hospital when you're basically almost at death's door. We don't go for health checks because we don't believe in the healthcare system. It's failed us.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just something we have to talk about and find ways to build trust or to create safe spaces with people we trust. So you find out that by the time we're diagnosed, we've been having spikes of sugar for years. Hence the reason why the HbA1c testing is something very important. But if you look at the cost in other parts of the world, outside of Canada, it's not a very cheap test, right? So of course finances play a role, but moreover, if you can understand why you're eating this way, how you can make tiny changes that can impact your health overall, that is going to be great. Because as I mentioned, your body doesn't show signs and symptoms in your 20s or your 30s, it's 40s, 50s, 60s, and by then you probably went 20 years in high blood sugar. Because remember, your body's natural response to stress is an increase in blood sugar. When you have cold, a regular common cold, your sugar can be high. So what happens is when you have more cortisol being released in your body, that is your body like coping mechanism. You have a spike in sugar because your body, let's say, a very important thing I want to mention, your body is not able to differentiate between a perceived stress
Mm-hmm.
and a real stress. So if you're angry because you don't like somebody at work, or you gotta go see a boss, and
Right.
arguing with your heart will start racing, your intestines will start to rumble. You have the exact same reaction as if though you're in a real life stressful event, and your body's reaction to that is increase of blood sugar. So normally that's a coping mechanism for your body. So imagine having high stress coupled with poor diet, a diet full of carbs. You could go 20, 30 years of having high blood sugar, not even realizing it. And by the time you do realize it, kidney failure, loss of eyesight, nerve damage, issues with your cholesterol. And most people in our community have diabetes and high blood pressure because they interrelate. So it's very important
You just
that
touched on something that I have to pause for a second. Man, you're hitting me hard in my backyard right now. Stress, that internal stress that you sometimes don't recognize that you're going through, and you want to know why your blood sugar is spiking, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your A1C is out of whack, is it?
no,
Okay, so here's my thing. Someone, and I guess that type of diabetes we're talking about is type 2, am I correct?
we're talking about type 2
Okay,
diabetes. Yes.
type 2. Can type 2 diabetes be reversed? I've heard people say this can, some people say no it can't. Can it be reversed?
So my honest opinion on that is it is very subjective to the individual. Have I met individuals that have reversed type 2? Yes, I have. Is it possible for everybody? I don't know, right? Change is not something that's easy. And there's a lot of research indicating that you can reverse. But I think it is very, again, subjective to the individual. I've met two persons, one in Belize, one person in Canada. The person in Canada wasn't a person of color. I believe they were from one of the European countries. And they actually reversed it, whereby they're no longer taking metformin, they're taking no type of medication, their blood sugar is under control. I have read up about a family, a black family in the States who also achieved it. But again, I feel like it is not something that we can just say, yes, you can reverse it. It takes a lot of time. It takes you really knowing your body, and it takes you being extremely intentful. And again, it's when you find out you have diabetes. Because let's say you're at the point whereby you're having kidney failure, heart disease, I'm not able to comment. I have not seen research of, in what stage you have to be to reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
So these are key factors when talking about reversals. Depend how it could be how old you are when you find out. Are you pre-diabetic when you found out? It can be. There's a lot of factors, but like I said, I've met persons that have done it, but I cannot say yes, it's 100% reversible. It's really subjective to the individual.
Pre-diabetic. You just mentioned the word. I was talking to another individual who told me there's no such thing as pre-diabetic. Is that true or not?
When they said there's no such thing, what were they referring to? The word?
Because we were talking, and I said, this person was pre-diabetic, and they said, no, there's no such thing. You're either diabetic or you're not diabetic. I'm thinking, okay, I don't know too much about it, so I'm not gonna argue. I just repeating what I heard.
Well, everybody, depending on what side of the spectrum you are as a healthcare professional, you might disagree with some of the wording, right? You might disagree with the term pre-diabetic, right? So they're probably implying that you're either diabetic or you're not. But that term comes in fact when we're looking at the A1C testing, right? Sometimes our sugar levels are literally at the borderline. So a doctor would say something like pre, because you don't have enough data or enough health test results to say you are 100% confirmed diabetic. Right? So I'm not sure where that person, like, what was their rationale, but that is what the term pre-diabetic means. It means that your initial set of testings may be indicating that you could be diabetic, but we need to study your blood sugars more you have to do more follow-up tests to be fully confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes when we go to the hospital, and this is not an attack on any healthcare system, but there is times whereby you go, you get a reading, and then they're like, oh, you're diabetic, or you might be diabetic. The reality is you need data to make a full assessment, because your blood sugar is something that changes sometimes what you eat, the stress level, your age. As again, there's many factors that play into those sugar readings. So that term is just a guide to say, hey, I gotta wake up. This is a wake up call. I gotta do better. Or those results can be a leading up to say, okay, you're about to develop diabetes, because now all your results are very consistent with being diabetic. So that is where the term pre comes in. It means that you're at the border with your results. And after further testing, they can determine, okay, you've been consistently having 7.8 or 8 on your HbA1c, or all your, fasting blood glucose in the morning has been 10 or 12. Those numbers along with your testing will indicate, where you are, if you're either diabetic or not, or you're on the border. So I'm not sure where, again, if you're a nutritionist, if you're a doctor, you might have a different view of the terminologies, right? They're just terms.
We have to have you back again. We have to have you back again. We'll bring you back again, because I'm going to ask you this one last question before I go to my next interview. The thing is, my doctor have told me, because noticing me being 5.4, 5.5, she says, watch it, you're going higher, not lower, right? Because I was 4.5, and then all of a sudden I was registering 5.5, 5.4, and she says, be careful, But when I do my morning tests, I will get like 7, 6.5, 8, 9.5. Sometimes once or twice I've gotten 10, but it's always 7.5, 6.5, 7, 8, that kind of thing. Now, you use some numbers there, some letters, H something and A1C. I know A1C is the main test that they do. What's this H thing that you're talking about?
So the HbA1c is the same thing.
Okay.
The HbA1c, that is where they test your red blood cell 3 months. So it looks at the lifespan of your red blood cell. So that test cannot be cheated per se, because if you're like diabetic, sometimes you know when to test your sugars to get low numbers. But when you do a HbA1c, it tells you your blood sugar levels 3 months prior to the date of you taking it.
Listen.
So that's why that test is so accurate, right? So you can't lie. You cannot lie, right? Because I've had patients who, because they know they're diabetic, they know what to eat, what to do on the day of the regular fasting, or when you prick your blood finger, you do it at home.
Yeah.
Those, have also other factors that can, make it vary. But your HbA1c testing, you cannot get away from it, because it's 3 months prior to the date of you taking it.
Listen, are you free next Wednesday? Because if you are, we want you back. We want to talk some more about this, especially in this season that we're in, this pandemic season. We found out a lot of our culture, our nation of people, Afrocentric people, have found out that most of us didn't know that we were sick. Hence the reason why most of us, when it came to COVID-19, escalated into something different, because it says, pending on this is how you're going to become. So a lot of us discovered in this pandemic season that we were diabetic or hypertension, whatever, but a lot of us discovered this and we didn't know we were. So if you can, and you're available next Wednesday, we'd love to have you back and talk some more about diabetes.
I'll be here next Wednesday.
Perfect. We want to thank you so much for Mystery, and you are a mystery, because you got a lot of wealth of information that you're sharing with us, and I thank you so much for sharing with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to being back next week, Wednesday.
Thank you, and we look forward to having you too. Have yourself a blessed day now.
You too.
God bless you. Bye-bye. That's Mystery from Diabeat, dia-beatit.ca. Check her out. Check out the website. You got all kinds of information there. I mean, that you cannot stop. Dia-beatit, dia-it.ca. This is SPRLiveFM.com, broadcasting through the Fun City Radio FM Success Radio, Magachu